I drained my savings to pay off their $5,000 debt, saving them from a lawsuit. 2 days later, I overheard Jessica telling guests I only helped because I was lonely and desperate for importance. I silently walked away, canceled the business loan I was guaranteeing, and waited for the inevitable crash. The heat of the afternoon sun felt oppressive, pressing down on my shoulders like a physical weight, but it was nothing compared to the exhaustion settling deep in my bones. I was 52 years old, and for the last decade, I felt like I had been carrying two households on my back, my own and my brother Rob's. I stood near the sliding glass door of Rob and Jessica's patio, holding a glass of iced tea that was sweating in the heat. Condensation dripped down my fingers, cold and sticky. Inside, the air conditioning was humming, a luxury I knew they couldn't actually afford, just like the catered spread on the picnic table outside and the new outfit Jessica was wearing. I was feeling particularly fragile that day. I had been battling a persistent migraine for 3 days, the kind that throbs behind the eyes and makes the world look a little too bright, a little too sharp. But I had come anyway. I had come because Rob had begged me to, saying it was a celebration of new beginnings, and because, just 48 hours prior, I had wired $5,000 to a collection agency on their behalf. I needed a moment of quiet. The noise of the party, about 20 of their friends, people I barely knew, was becoming a dull roar in my ears. I stepped back into the shadow of the awning, intending to slip inside to use the powder room and take a migraine pill I had in my purse. The sliding door was open just a crack, the screen door pulled shut. As I reached for the handle, a voice drifted out from the kitchen, sharp and clear over the low hum of the refrigerator. "I mean, honestly, it's a little sad," Jessica's voice said. It was that distinct tone she used when she was gossiping, hushed, but laced with a superior sort of pity. She wired the money immediately, didn't even ask to see the bill. I froze. My hand hovered inches from the door handle. I knew I shouldn't listen. I knew that eavesdropping rarely led to anything but heartache, but my feet seemed nailed to the decking. 5,000? Another voice asked. I recognized it as one of Jessica's gym friends, a woman named Tara. Just like that. Just like that, Jessica laughed. It wasn't a kind laugh. It was light, airy, and dismissive. Rob feels guilty sometimes, but I tell him, look, Isabella has no one else. No husband, no kids. Her career is her whole life, and honestly, it's boring. Helping us makes her feel, I don't know, relevant, important. The air left my lungs. It felt as if someone had swung a sledgehammer into my stomach. Relevant, Tara snorted. That's an expensive way to feel relevant. It's the only way she knows, Jessica continued, the sound of ice clinking against glass echoing through the screen. She comes over here, plays the savior, pats herself on the back, and goes home to her empty house. We're basically doing her a favor by letting her fix our messes. It gives her purpose. Without us, she's just here, existing. I stood there, trembling. The migraine that had been a dull throb suddenly spiked into a blinding spike of agony. I thought about the transfer I had made. I thought about the vacation I had canceled 3 years in a row to help them with emergencies. I thought about the late nights I worked as a senior project manager, managing stress levels that would break most people, just so I could have the liquidity to save my little brother when he fell. They didn't see love. They didn't see sacrifice. They saw a transaction. They saw a lonely, pathetic woman paying an admission fee to be part of their family. I looked down at the iced tea in my hand. My grip was so tight my knuckles were white. I wanted to scream. I wanted to storm in there and throw the drink in her face. I wanted to demand my money back. But I didn't. Instead, a cold, hard resolve washed over me, numbing the pain in my head. It was a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I carefully set the glass down on a side table on the patio, turned around, and walked toward the gate. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't make a scene. I just walked to my car, my heart pounding a rhythm of absolute, terrifying finality. The betrayal was worse than the financial loss. It was worse than the insults. It was the realization that my love had been weaponized against me. As I sat in the driver's seat, staring at the front door of the house I had helped save from foreclosure twice, I whispered to the empty air, "You think I'm just here to feel important? Fine. Let's see how important I am when I'm gone." The drive home was a blur of gray highway and red taillights. My hands were shaking so badly, I had to grip the steering wheel at 10 and 2 just to key. Ep the car steady. Every time I blinked, I heard Jessica's voice again. "We're basically doing her a favor." I pulled into my driveway, a modest driveway leading to a modest house. That was the irony. I lived well below my means. I drove a 6-year-old sedan. I shopped sales. I cooked at home. Rob and Jessica, on the other hand, drove leased luxury SUVs and went on mental health retreats whenever life got too hard. And I, the boring sister with the empty life, was the one funding it. I unlocked my front door and stepped into the silence of my hallway. Usually, this silence felt peaceful, a refuge from the chaos of my job. Today, thanks to Jessica, it felt heavy. Was it true? Was I just a pathetic spinster trying to buy affection? I walked into my kitchen and poured a glass of water, my hands still trembling. I needed to ground myself. I sat at my small kitchen table and unlocked my phone. I opened my banking app. There it was, right at the top of the transaction history, dated 2 days ago. Outgoing wire transfer. $5,000,000. I stared at the number. $5,000. That wasn't just disposable income for me. That was money I had set aside for roof repairs. When Rob had called me frantic, saying a creditor was threatening to garnish his wages and that Jessica was having panic attacks, I hadn't hesitated. I had moved the money from my savings to checking and sent it within the hour. Ping! My phone buzzed on the table. It was a text from Rob. "Hey Izzy, where did you go? Jess said she saw your car leave. We haven't even cut the cake yet. Come back, don't be antisocial lol." The lol at the end felt like a slap in the face. Antisocial, that was the narrative they spun. Isabella the hermit, Isabella the bank. I typed out a response, then deleted it. I typed another, angrier one, and deleted that too. Finally, I just put the phone face down. I wasn't going to go back. I wasn't going to eat their cake. I stood up and walked into my home office. It was a tidy room, lined with bookshelves and a large mahogany desk where I spent my evenings managing timelines and budgets for multi-million-dollar construction projects. I was good at my job. I was respected. I commanded rooms full of architects and engineers. But to my family, I was nothing more than a checkbook with a pulse. My eyes landed on a manila folder sitting squarely in the center of my desk. A yellow sticky note was attached to the front, written in my own handwriting, "Sign and notarize by Tuesday." It was the guarantor agreement. Rob and Jessica had this dream. They wanted to open a boutique fitness studio. They had no credit, no capital, and no experience, but they had convinced themselves that this was their ticket to millions. They had applied for a massive small business loan, $200,000, but the bank wouldn't touch them without a guarantor who had significant assets and a pristine credit score. I had spent the last 2 weeks agonizing over it, reviewing their frankly terrible business plan, trying to fix their projections. Rob had sworn this was the last time they'd ask for help. He had cried, actually cried, saying he wanted to build a legacy for his family. And I had believed him. I had agreed to sign. The appointment with the notary was set for Monday morning. If I signed that paper, I would be personally liable for the entire debt if they defaulted. And knowing them, they would default. I reached out and touched the folder. The paper felt cool and smooth. "They think I'm desperate," I whispered, the anger in my chest tightening into a cold, hard knot. "They think I'm trapped." I picked up the folder. It felt heavy, not with paper, but with the weight of my own stupidity. I had been ready to risk my retirement, my home, my security, just to see my brother smile, just to feel like a good sister. Jessica's voice echoed in my mind. "Without us, she's just here." I opened the folder and looked at the signature line. Guarantor, Isabella redacted. I reached for my pen, not to sign it, but to tap it rhythmically against the desk. They had forgotten one crucial thing about me. In my line of work, I didn't just build things, I managed risk. And when a project became too toxic, when the foundation was rotten and the partners were acting in bad faith, you didn't keep pouring concrete. You issued a stop work order. And they had no idea that I held the ultimate stop work order. Not just this loan, but something far bigger. Something Mom and Dad had set up years ago, something that was scheduled to execute in less than a month. They thought they had me figured out. They were about to learn that they didn't know me at all. To understand why the betrayal cut so deep, you have to understand the history. I wasn't just an older sister. For a long time, I had been a surrogate parent. Our parents died within 2 years of each other when I was 30 and Rob was 22. I was already established in my career, climbing the ladder, while Rob was drifting. He was the golden boy, the baby of the family, charming but aimless. When Mom died, I was the executor. I managed the estate, I sold the house, I invested the modest inheritance. Rob blew through his share in 18 months. He bought a sports car. He went to Europe. He invested in a friend's record label that didn't exist. When the money was gone, he came to me. And because I missed our parents, because he was the only family I had left, I opened my wallet. I paid his rent. I paid for his community college classes that he never finished. I smoothed over every bump in his road because I thought that's what family did. Then came Jessica. Rob met her 5 years ago at a club. Jessica was 5 years younger than him, undeniably beautiful and sharply ambitious, but not for work. She was ambitious for a lifestyle. She was a lifestyle influencer on social media with 3,000 followers, which meant she took photos of coffee and clothes she couldn't afford and posted inspirational quotes about hustle. From the moment she entered the picture, the dynamic shifted. Before Jessica, Rob was just irresponsible. With Jessica, he became entitled. She was the one who convinced him they deserved a luxury apartment. She was the one who insisted they needed a brand new car because the old one, which I had paid for, didn't fit her brand. I remember the first time I really saw her mask slip. It was a Christmas dinner 3 years ago. I had given them a generous check for $500 as a gift. Jessica had looked at it, smiled a tight, thin smile, and said, "Oh, thank you, Isabella. This will cover, well, the utilities, I guess." She had made me feel cheap for giving them $500. And yet, Rob worshipped her. He was terrified of losing her. He became her mouthpiece. If Jessica wanted a vacation, Rob would call me with a sob story about how stressed she was and how he was worried about her mental health. If Jessica wanted new furniture, Rob would tell me their old bed was causing him back problems. I saw through it mostly, but I wanted Rob to be happy. I wanted to be the supportive aunt if they ever had kids. I wanted to be invited to Thanksgiving, so I paid. I thought I was buying stability. Jessica thought I was paying tribute. The antagonist in my life wasn't a mustache-twirling villain. She was a woman with perfect highlights, a fake smile, and a heart made of calculation. Jessica didn't work. She managed the home, which apparently involved a lot of brunch and online shopping. Rob worked in sales, commissions fluctuating wildly, and they lived constantly at the edge of ruin. That $5,000 I had just sent? It wasn't for a medical emergency. It was because Jessica had run up a store credit card to its limit and then ignored the bills for 6 months until a process server showed up at their door. She had cried to Rob that she would be humiliated if she was sued. So I saved her. I saved her from humiliation. And in return, she stood in her kitchen, eating food I effectively paid for, and mocked my existence to a stranger. I sat at my desk, the room darkening as the sun went down. I didn't turn on the light. I just sat there with the guarantor papers and the memories of 10 years of thankless checks. "She thinks I have no life," I said to the darkroom. "She thinks I'm boring." I pulled out my phone again. I didn't text Rob back. Instead, I opened my email and composed a message to my attorney, Mr. Henderson. Mr. Henderson was the one who had helped my parents set up the family trust. A trust that I managed. A trust that was set to distribute the final, substantial portion of my parents' assets, a nest egg that had been growing quietly for 20 years, to Rob and me upon Rob's upcoming 30th birthday. Rob knew about the trust. He and Jessica had already mentally spent that money. They talked about it constantly. When the trust hits, they would say, we're buying a house in the hills, we're getting a Tesla. But there was a clause in that trust. A clause my father, who knew his son better than I liked to admit, had insisted on. It gave the trustee, me, absolute discretion to withhold distribution if the beneficiary was deemed financially unstable, or if the funds were at risk of being squandered due to undue influence. I looked at the email draft. Subject, Robert redacted trust distribution, urgent. Dear Mr. Henderson, please prepare the necessary paperwork to invoke Clause 4 regarding the withholding of distribution due to financial instability. We also need to discuss the guarantor agreement for the business loan. I will not be signing it. I hovered over the send button. This was the nuclear option. This wouldn't just stop the loan, it would freeze their big payout indefinitely. It would ruin their plans. It would likely destroy my relationship with my brother. I thought of Jessie. Laughing, it gives her purpose. My purpose was about to change. My purpose was no longer to be their safety net. My purpose was to teach them the value of the dollar they so carelessly mocked. I pressed send. Monday morning arrived with a steel gray sky that matched the temperature in my veins. Usually, I started my work week with a sense of chaotic urgency, rushing to check emails and put out fires on my construction sites. Today, however, I moved with a terrifyingly calm precision. I was no longer just a sister or an aunt figure. I was a project manager who had just identified a critical structural failure in a long-term investment. I arrived at my office at 7:00 a.m. sharp. My assistant, Karen, looked up from her coffee, surprised. Isabella, you're early, and you look different, she said, tilting her head. Did you do something to your hair? No, I said, placing my briefcase on my desk. I just woke up, Karen. I finally woke up. I closed my office door and sat down. The guarantor paperwork was still there, sitting in the center of my desk like an unexploded ordnance. I didn't shred it. Not yet. I needed it for reference. My first call wasn't to Rob, despite the 3 voicemails he had already left me asking if I was ready for the notary. My first call was to the bank officer handling their loan application. This is Isabella, I said when he answered, my voice steady. I'm calling regarding the loan application for J&R Fitness. I am withdrawing my intent to sign as guarantor. Please note in the file that I will not be supporting this application under any circumstances. The banker sounded flustered. Oh, I see. Well, without a guarantor, given the applicant's credit history, the application will be immediately denied. Are you sure? They seemed quite desperate for this capital. I am sure, I said. Cancel it. I hung up. Step 1 was complete. Now for the investigation. The project manager in me knew that you couldn't fix a problem until you understood the root cause. I had spent years throwing money at symptoms, Rob's unexpected bills, Jessica's emergencies. I had never actually audited the books. I pulled the business plan they had given me out of the folder. I had skimmed it before, mostly looking at the projected revenue, which seemed optimistic but possible. Now, I looked at the expenses. They had listed a commercial lease deposit of $15,000. They had also listed equipment procurement from a company called Elite Fitness Supply for $40,000. I opened my laptop and started searching. I typed in the address of the commercial space they claimed to be leasing. It was a prime retail spot downtown. I found the property management company's number and dialed. Hi, I'm inquiring about the retail space on 4th and Main, I said. Is it currently off the market? My brother mentioned he was putting down a deposit. There was a pause on the line, followed by the sound of typing. 4th and Main? No, ma'am, that space is still very much available. We haven't had a serious inquiry on that unit in 3 months. The rent is quite high. My stomach tightened. They hadn't put down a deposit, but they had asked me for $2,000 last week for leaseholding fees. I had given it to them in cash. I moved on to the equipment supplier. Elite Fitness Supply, I Googled it. No website, no Google Maps listing. I searched the state business registry. Nothing. I stared at the invoice included in the business plan. It looked professional enough, with a logo and an invoice number. But when I looked closer at the address listed at the bottom, I recognized the zip code. It wasn't a warehouse district. It was a residential area. I pulled up Street View. The address for this major equipment supplier was a rundown apartment complex in a neighboring town. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. There was no business, or at least there was no real plan. They were padding the loan amount with fake invoices to extract cash for themselves. They weren't trying to build a gym, they were trying to embezzle $200,000 from a bank, with me left holding the bag when they inevitably defaulted. It wasn't just incompetence, it was fraud, and they were going to use my credit score to commit it. I sat back in my chair, feeling a cold sweat break out on my forehead. This was so much worse than Jessica calling me boring. This was predatory. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from Jessica this time. Hey, just checking in. Rob is stressing out lol. What time are you meeting the notary? We are so excited to get this started. I stared at the screen. The audacity was breathtaking. They were actively lying to my face, creating fake documents, and stealing from me in increments, all while mocking me behind my back. I didn't reply. I simply forwarded the invoice from Elite Fitness Supply to my work email to print a high resolution copy. Then I picked up my phone and called Mr. Henderson, my parents' estate lawyer. Isabella, his warm, gravelly voice answered. I received your email about the trust. That is a serious step. Are you certain? I need you to clear your schedule for this afternoon, Mr. Henderson, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper as Karen walked past my glass door. I found something. We aren't just looking at financial instability anymore. We're looking at criminal intent. Tuesday morning, the day I was supposed to sign the papers, came with a silence that was deafening. I had turned my phone on Do Not Disturb the night before. When I woke up and checked it at 6:00 a.m., I had 42 missed calls and 63 text messages. The progression of the texts told a story all on its own. 8:00 a.m. Monday. Hey, call us back. 12:00 p.m. Monday. Is everything okay? 3:00 p.m. Monday. The bank just called. They said the application is canceled. What is going on? 5:00 p.m. Monday. Isabella, pick up the phone. 9:00 p.m. Monday. You can't do this to us. You promised. 11:30 p.m. Monday. I guess you just want us to fail. Thanks a lot. I made my coffee, drank it slowly on my patio, and watched the birds at the feeder. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the frantic urge to fix their panic. I felt a strange, detached curiosity. At 9:00 a.m., I turned off Do Not Disturb and sent a single text to the group chat with Rob and Jessica. Come to my house, now. They arrived in 20 minutes. I heard car doors slam and the rapid click-clack of Jessica's heels on my front walk. I left the front door unlocked and sat in my living room, waiting. The door burst open. Rob looked like a wreck, pale, with dark circles under his eyes, his hair unwashed. Jessica, however, looked furious. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide with indignation. What is wrong with you? Jessica screamed before she was even fully in the room. Do you have any idea what you've done? The bank officer laughed at us. He said the guarantor withdrew. You made us look like idiots. Rob rushed past her, dropping to his knees by my armchair. It was a practiced move, one he had used since we were teenagers. Izzy, please, tell me it was a mistake. Tell me you didn't cancel it. We lose everything if we don't get this funding. We already made commitments. I looked at my brother, really looked at him. I saw the weakness in his jaw, the shifting eyes. I saw a man who had never been allowed to fall and thus never learned how to stand. I canceled it, I said calmly. Why? Jessica demanded, stepping closer. She loomed over me, trying to use her height to intimidate. Because of some mood swing, because you're jealous that we're actually doing something with our lives. I stood up. I wasn't tall, but I carried the authority of a woman who managed crews of 200 men. No, because I was at your party on Saturday. Jessica froze, her mouth opened slightly, then closed. She blinked rapidly. I don't know what you mean. I was at the sliding glass door, I said, my voice level but cutting. I heard you, Jessica. I heard you tell your friends that I have no life, that I'm boring, that I only help you to feel relevant, that you're doing me a favor by taking my money. The room went dead silent. Rob looked from me to Jessica, his face crumpling in confusion. Jess, you said that. Jessica's face cycled through 3 different expressions in a second. Shock, fear, and finally, defensive rage. You were eavesdropping, she spat, crossing her arms. That is so typical. You were lurking around spying on me. That's exactly what I meant. You're obsessed with us. I was getting a glass of iced tea, I countered. And thank you. You gave me a moment of clarity I should have had 10 years ago. You said I was buying your love. You were right. I was. And as of today, the transaction is declined. You can't be serious, Rob stammered, standing up. Izzy, she was just venting. She didn't mean it. You can't destroy our future over a few words. It's not just words, Rob, I said. I walked over to the side table where I had placed the folder containing my investigation results. It's the lying, it's the fraud. I pulled out the printout of the fake invoice from Elite Fitness Supply. I looked into your vendor, I said, holding the paper up. The one you needed $40,000 for, the address is an apartment complex in Stockton. There is no business, it's fake. Rob turned a ghostly shade of white. He looked at Jessica. Jessica didn't look at him. She stared at the paper in my hand with a look of pure hatred. And the landlord on 4th and Main, I continued, relentless. They never got a deposit, but I gave you $2,000 last week for that deposit. Where is my money, Rob? Rob stuttered, looking at his feet. It was for expenses, Jessica yelled, stepping in front of him. We had application fees, we had consulting fees. You don't understand how business works. I manage $10 million budgets, Jessica, I said coldly. I know exactly how business works, and I know what embezzlement looks like. You're crazy, Jessica sneered, though her voice was shaking now. You're just trying to control us. You want us to crawl. Well, we won't. We don't need your stupid signature. We'll find someone else. Good luck with that, I said. But before you go, you should know one more thing. I paused, letting the silence stretch until it was uncomfortable. I spoke to Mr. Henderson yesterday. Rob's head snapped up. Henderson, why? To discuss the trust, I said. The distribution that you're waiting for next month. The mention of the trust sucked the oxygen out of the room. This was the holy grail, the safety net they had been counting on to catch them when their fraudulent loan inevitably failed. What about the trust? Rob asked, his voice barely a whisper. I'll let Mr. Henderson explain the details, I said, moving to open the front door. But you should know that I have invoked the financial instability clause. There will be no distribution on your birthday, Rob, not next month, not the month after. Jessica let out a sound that was half scream, half growl. You can't do that. That's Rob's money. It's his inheritance. You're stealing from him. It's a conditional trust, I corrected her. And the condition is that the beneficiary must demonstrate fiscal responsibility. Creating fake invoices to defraud a bank is the opposite of fiscal responsibility. I have a fiduciary duty to protect the principal from being squandered. I'll sue you, Jessica screamed. Her face was contorted, ugly with greed. I'll hire a lawyer and I'll sue you for every penny you have. With what money? I asked simply. You can't even pay your credit card bill without my help. Get out of my house. I didn't wait for them to leave. I walked into my kitchen and picked up the phone, dialing the police non-emergency line, making sure they saw me do it. I'd like to report a disturbance, I began. Jessica grabbed Rob's arm and practically dragged him out the door. Let's go, Rob. She's psychotic. We'll fix this. The door slammed shut, and I finally exhaled. My legs felt like jelly, but my mind was clear. The next 3 days were a war of attrition. It started with the social media posts. Jessica blocked me, but my friends sent me screenshots. Lengthy, vague posts about toxic family members and narcissists who use money to control you. She posted a crying selfie with the caption, "Sometimes the people who are supposed to support you are the ones holding the knife." Then came the flying monkeys. Our distant cousins, an aunt I hadn't spoken to in 5 years, they all started calling. Jessica had spun a masterful tale. According to her, I had promised to fund their business, made them sign leases and quit their jobs, a lie, Rob was still employed, and then pulled the rug out at the last second because I was jealous of their happiness. Isabella, how could you? Aunt Marge left on my voicemail. Rob is family. You can't hold money over his head like that. I didn't engage. I didn't defend myself. I built my case. I met with Mr. Henderson again. We went over the fake invoice evidence. This is strong, Henderson said, adjusting his glasses. If they challenge the withholding of the trust in court, this document alone proves that handing them a lump sum would be negligent on your part. It proves they are willing to falsify documents to access funds. No judge will overturn your decision with this in evidence. What about the $2,000 I gave them for the deposit? I asked. Technically, that's a civil matter, Henderson said. You could sue them in small claims, but the real value of that missing money is evidentiary. It proves a pattern. By Friday, the silence from Rob broke. He didn't text, he didn't call. He showed up at my office. I was in a meeting with a structural engineer when Karen knocked on the glass. She looked worried. Your brother is here. He says it's an emergency. He looks really bad, Isabella. I excused myself and walked out to the lobby. Rob was sitting in one of the waiting chairs, his head in his hands. He looked like he had aged 10 years in 4 days. His clothes were rumpled. He smelled faintly of stale alcohol. Rob, I said, keeping my distance. He looked up and his eyes were red-rimmed. They're evicting us, Izzy. I didn't blink. I thought you owned the condo. We took out a second mortgage last year, he confessed, his voice cracking. To pay for the wedding expenses, and the trip to Cabo, we haven't paid it in 3 months. The foreclosure notice came today. I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was distant, muffled by the layers of betrayal. Where is Jessica? She's at her mom's, he said. She said she can't be around the negative energy. Why, please, I know you're mad. I know we messed up with the loan application. It was Jess's idea. She said it was just creative accounting. Everyone does it. But I need the trust money, just a little bit. Just enough to save the condo. Please. Creative accounting is a felony, Rob, I said softly. I know. He was crying now, ignoring the stares of the receptionist. I'm sorry, just unfreeze the trust, please. I'll do whatever you want. I'll leave Jessica if that's what you want. The offer hung in the air, pathetic and revealing. He was willing to sell out his wife just as easily as he had sold out me. I can't do that, Rob, I said. The trust is legally frozen. Henderson has filed the paperwork. It's out of my hands until an audit is completed. Then give me a loan, he begged, reaching out to grab my hand. I pulled back. You have savings. You always have money. Just $10,000. I'll pay you back. I looked at my brother. This man who was 30 years old but still acted like a child who had dropped his ice cream cone. I paid $5,000 last week to save you from a lawsuit, I said. And 2 days later, you let your wife mock me for it. You didn't defend me. You didn't stop her. You laughed, Rob. I saw you smiling. I was just trying to keep the peace, he sobbed. No, I said, stepping back toward the security door of my office. You were biting the hand that fed you, and now you're starving. I am not giving you $10,000. I am not giving you 10 cents. You have a job, you have a wife who claims to be a genius. Figure it out. She'll leave me, Rob wailed. If I lose the condo, she'll leave me. I looked at him with a pity that was finally devoid of obligation. If she leaves you because you're broke, I said, then you never really had her to begin with. I turned to Karen. Please call security to escort my brother out. As I walked back to my office, I could hear him shouting my name. But for the first time in my life, I didn't turn back. I had one more battle to fight, the public one. The family barbecue was this Sunday, Mother's Day, and everyone, including the flying monkeys, would be there. It was time to clear my name. Sunday arrived, bringing with it the kind of aggressive, cheerful sunshine that felt mocking in the face of family collapse. The event was Aunt Marge's annual Mother's Day barbecue, a tradition that had continued even after my own mother passed away. It was a gathering of the extended clan, uncles, cousins, second cousins, and the various hangers on that accumulated around Marge's hospitality. Usually, I looked forward to these. I would bring my famous potato salad, sit with the elders, and relax. Today, I felt like I was walking into a coliseum. I parked my sedan 3 houses down from Marge's place. As I walked up the driveway, I could hear the familiar murmur of conversation and the sizzle of the grill. But as soon as I unlatched the gate and stepped into the backyard, the atmosphere shifted. It was subtle at first, a drop in volume, a few heads turning, eyes darting away when they met mine. Jessica was holding court near the punch bowl, wearing a sundress that probably cost more than my first car. Rob was standing next to her, looking like a man awaiting a firing squad. He held a beer that he hadn't taken a sip of in a long time. The condensation was pooling around his shoes. I walked straight to Aunt Marge, who was manning the buffet table. "Happy Mother's Day, Aunt Marge," I said, holding out a bouquet of lilies. Marge took the flowers, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She placed them on the table with a heavy sigh. "I'm glad you came, Isabella, but I have to say, the tension is thick enough to cut with a knife. Jessica has been talking." "I'm sure she has," I said calmly. "But I'm not here to cause a scene. I'm just here to see family." "Well," Marge lowered her voice, leaning in, "she's telling people you're trying to bankrupt them out of spite. Uncle Steve is pretty upset. You know how he feels about family loyalty." I looked across the yard. Uncle Steve, my father's older brother and a retired forensic accountant, was listening intently to Jessica. Jessica was dabbing at her eyes with a napkin, performing the role of the victimized ingenue to perfection. I took a deep breath. "Excuse me, Marge." I walked toward the center of the patio. I didn't rush. I moved with the slow, deliberate pace of a project manager walking a site inspection. As I approached, Jessica saw me. Her eyes narrowed, and she straightened her spine, seemingly emboldened by her audience. "Oh, look," Jessica said, her voice pitched loud enough to carry across the yard. "The benefactor has arrived. Did you come to inspect your investment? Oh, wait, you canceled that, didn't you?" The chatter in the yard died out completely. Everyone was watching. "I came to have a burger, Jessica," I said, keeping my voice even, "and to wish my aunt a happy Mother's Day." "That's rich," Jessica scoffed, stepping forward. "You act like you care about family, but you're holding Rob's inheritance hostage. You're letting us get evicted because you're on a power trip. Tell them, Isabella. Tell everyone why you froze the trust." Rob put a hand on her arm. "Jess, don't." "No," she shook him off. "They should know. She's jealous, Rob. She's jealous that we have a life and she has paperwork. She's trying to ruin us." Uncle Steve stepped forward. He was a formidable man, tall and stern. "Isabella," he rumbled. "Is this true? Are you withholding the distribution? You know your father wanted that money to go to Rob when he turned 30. "I am following the terms of the trust, Uncle Steve," I said. "Clause 4. Financial instability and undue influence." "We aren't unstable," Jessica shrieked. We had a business plan, we had a loan approved until she sabotaged it. Sabotaged, I repeated. I reached into my large tote bag. Is that what we're calling it now? I pulled out a thick manila envelope. I had come prepared. Jessica claims I stopped the loan out of spite. I addressed the group, my voice projecting clearly. She claims I am withholding the inheritance because I am jealous. But the truth is, as the trustee, I cannot release funds to beneficiaries who are engaged in criminal fraud. A gasp rippled through the gathered family. That's a lie, Jessica screamed. She's lying. I ignored her and handed the envelope to Uncle Steve. Uncle Steve, you were an accountant for 40 years. Take a look at the top document. It's an invoice for $40,000 submitted to the bank for gym equipment from a company called Elite Fitness Supply. Steve put on his reading glasses. He looked at the paper, then at me. Now, I continued, look at the second page. That is a printout from the county assessor's office for the address listed on that invoice. Steve, is that a commercial warehouse? Steve's brow furrowed. He looked closer. No, it's a residential apartment complex in Stockton, Unit B. Exactly, I said. There is no Elite Fitness Supply. Jessica and Rob created a fake vendor to invoice the bank for $40,000 of equipment that doesn't exist. They were going to pocket the cash. I turned to look at Rob. He had his head in his hands, unable to look anyone in the eye. Rob, I said softly, tell them. It's not true, Jessica yelled, looking around frantically. Isabella forged that. She's making it up. And the landlord? I asked, turning back to Jessica. I called the property management firm for the downtown space. You never put down a deposit, but you took $2,000 from me last week for lease fees. Where is that money, Jessica? Jessica opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at Rob, waiting for him to defend her, to spin a lie, to do something. But Rob was done. The weight of the public exposure, the shame of Uncle Steve's disappointed stare, it crushed him. We spent it, Rob whispered. What did you say? Uncle Steve asked sharply. Rob looked up, tears streaming down his face. We spent it. The $2,000. We spent it on the car payment and a dinner at Nabu. There was no lease. We were going to figure it out later. Rob, Jessica hissed, grabbing his arm. Shut up. I'm tired, Jess, Rob sobbed, pulling away from her. I'm so tired of lying, it's over. The silence in the backyard was absolute. The relatives who had been glaring at me moments ago were now looking at Jessica with a mixture of horror and disgust. You tried to get your sister to sign a federal loan guarantee based on fraudulent documents? Uncle Steve asked, his voice low and dangerous. Do you have any idea what would have happened to her if you defaulted? She would have been liable. She could have faced charges for being party to fraud. We didn't think, Rob stammered. You didn't care, I corrected him. I looked at Jessica. You didn't care if I lost my home. You didn't care if I lost my career. As long as you got your money, as long as you could pretend to be successful. Jessica looked around the circle of faces. She saw no allies. She saw no sympathy. The mask finally crumbled completely, revealing the ugly, snarling entitlement beneath. Fine, she screamed, throwing her hands up. Keep the money. Keep your boring, miserable little life. You think you're better than me? You're just a sad, lonely old woman who has to buy people to come to her house. I don't need you. I don't need any of you. She spun around and stomped toward the gate. She didn't look back at Rob. She didn't wait for him. She just marched out, got in her leased SUV, and peeled away, tires screeching. Rob stood alone in the middle of the grass. He looked small. He looked broken. He looked at me, his eyes pleading for me to fix it, to tell him it would be okay, to write a check to make the bad feel. Ings, go away. I looked back at him, and I felt a profound sense of peace. I wasn't his savior anymore. Happy Mother's Day, Aunt Marge, I said. I think I'll have that burger now. The fallout was swift and brutal, exactly as gravity dictates when a house of cards collapses. Without my financial backing, and with the trust firmly frozen, Rob and Jessica's lifestyle disintegrated within weeks. The foreclosure on the condo went through. The leased cars were repossessed. Jessica didn't stick around for the hard part. 2 days after the barbecue, she filed for divorce. Apparently, her vows of for richer, for poorer had a hidden clause that voided the contract if the poorer part actually happened. She moved back in with her parents in a different state and blocked Rob on every platform. Last I heard, she was dating a man 20 years her senior who owned a chain of car washes. I wished him luck. He would need it. Rob hit rock bottom. He ended up sleeping on a friend's couch for a month before moving into a studio apartment in a rougher part of town, one that he could actually afford on his fluctuating sales commission. For the first time in his life, he was paying his own bills. As for me, life became quietly, beautifully boring. I didn't have frantic phone calls at 11:00 p.m. I didn't have to check my bank account with a sense of dread. I redirected the money I used to funnel into their bottomless pit into my own happiness. I renovated my kitchen. I took a 2-week cruise to the Mediterranean, a real vacation where I didn't check my email once. It was 3 months later when I finally agreed to meet Rob. He suggested a coffee shop halfway between my office and his new apartment. When I walked in, he was already there, sitting at a small corner table. He looked different. He had lost weight and he looked tired, but he also looked real. He wasn't wearing the designer watch I had bought him for Christmas 2 years ago. He was wearing a simple button-down shirt. I sat down. "Hi, Rob." "Hey, Izzy," he said. He didn't reach for my hand. He didn't smile with that boyish charm he used to use to disarm me. He just looked at his coffee cup. "Thanks for coming." "You said you wanted to talk." "Yeah," he cleared his throat. I brought this." He slid a small, white envelope across the table. I hesitated, then opened it. Inside was a cashier's check for $200. "It's not much," he said quickly. "But I'm on a payment plan for the debts Jessica left me with. I did the math. If I pay you $200 a month, I can pay back the $5,000 you sent for the lawsuit in about 2 years. I know it doesn't cover everything else, but it's a start." I stared at the check. In the past, I would have pushed it back. I would have told him to keep it, to buy groceries, to treat himself. But I looked at his hands, calloused, nails trimmed short. I looked at the dark circles under his eyes that spoke of overtime shifts and sleepless nights worrying about rent. He was finally growing up. "Thank you, Rob," I said, folding the check and putting it in my purse. "I accept it." He let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for months. "I'm sorry, Izzy, about everything, about what she said, about what I let her say. You were never just a bank to me. I got lost." "I know," I said gently, "but you're finding your way back." "The trust?" he asked, but there was no demand in his voice, only curiosity. "It remains in the trust," I said firmly. "Mr. Henderson and I have set a review date for 5 years from now. If you can show 5 years of independent financial stability, no debts, and steady employment, we'll talk about a partial distribution." Rob nodded slowly. 5 years, that sounds fair. Honestly, I don't trust myself with it right now anyway. He took a sip of his coffee. "I miss her sometimes," he admitted, his voice cracking slightly. "Is that stupid? She ruined my life and I still miss her." "It's not stupid," I said. "It's grief. You're grieving the life you thought you had. But Rob, she didn't ruin your life. She just showed you that the foundation was rotten. Now you get to build something real, brick by brick." I reached across the table and placed my hand over his. He turned his hand over and squeezed mine. It wasn't the desperate grip of a drowning man reaching for a life preserver anymore. It was just a brother holding his sister's hand. "I have to get back to work," he said, checking the time on his phone, an older model with a cracked screen. I picked up a second shift at the warehouse. "Go," I smiled. "Don't be late." I watched him walk out of the coffee shop. He walked with his shoulders slumped slightly, carrying the weight of his mistakes, but he was moving forward under his own power. I finished my coffee in silence. Jessica was wrong. My life wasn't empty. It was full of peace, integrity, and the satisfaction of a job well done. I had cut off the add weight, and for the first time in a decade, I felt light. I didn't need to buy love. I had learned to love myself enough to stop paying for the privilege of being used. And that was a fortune no inheritance could ever match.